and the river, the normal levels are 2 feet. Flood stage is 10 feet, which is like, that's minor flood stage, so some people are going to get a little bit of water. The river was at 20 feet. So my shop had 6 feet of water in it, and I'm a block away from the river.
Welcome back to the Craftsman's Collective, a podcast designed to help makers in the concrete, wood, and steel industries improve their businesses and lives by discussing our common struggles, tips we found along the way, and how we can combine our unique perspectives to create even more spectacular pieces. In today's episode, I'm hanging out with Caleb Lawson. He is the owner-operator of Lawson Design in North Carolina. We talk about how to find and contact designers or the people you want to work with, touch on how to establish work-life balance, as well as many other topics. We talk quite a bit about Caleb's story, and he grills me a lot about mine. So if that's not your thing, and you're looking for info that's not industry specific, check the show notes for timestamps and any resources we mention throughout the episode. If you enjoy this episode and find it beneficial, giving it a thumbs up and subscribing will help tremendously. If you have feedback or people or topics you'd like to hear, then the YouTube comments are the best place to do that. And now, on to the episode, and I hope you enjoy.
Before we get going, though, I want to, I've met you, obviously, at my shop back in Orlando, but, tell me more about, you and your family and all that.
Oh, man, I hate talking about myself. Let's see, primarily, I would still be considered, if you're being honest about it, in more of the hobbyist category. I haven't really gone out and talked with designers. That's the thing that scares the shit out of me the most. So I'm more in that camp. I've been just kind of playing around with concrete and making a whole bunch of stupid things that people may never end up eventually buying.
Oh, no, it's not. The stuff you're making is not stupid at all.
Well, the question is, of course, somebody will buy it. I'm not in the camp that I don't think it, there's how many billion people in the world? Somebody would buy it. And I'm confident that there is someone out there that would. I still have to learn, the marketing aspect of it and the business aspect of it.
I'll tell you who you're going to have to market to, because the stuff you're making has, the amount of effort and work that you're having to put in to get out something like that. You're going to have to market to people who are going to pay $600 or $700 a square foot.
Yeah.
But so it's badass.
Yeah. I don't know. So I guess story-wise, let's see. Melanie and I got married, I don't even know how many years ago. It's probably over 10 years now.
What year
got
did you get
into
married? It's a usually good clue.
Yeah, I don't even remember. She knows that that's not really something that I'm going to remember, so it's fine. And then we moved into our first house a couple years later, and that age-old thing of, well, now we got to put furniture in it. Or what are we going to do? We started furniture shopping, and you're looking at dining room tables and coffee tables, and they're wanting thousands of dollars for some of these things. And I'm like, you are batshit crazy. You thinking I'm giving you a couple $1,000s for that? It's just not happening. So I started looking around at different materials. What can I make? Well, steel's pretty much off the table because the learning curve is just not exactly fun for making your first thing. And you have to have very highly specialized tools. And then I was like, okay, well, wood. And I was like, well, that's even worse. All the tools that you need to be able to make something with that is just bonkers. And then, of course, the learning curve. And then, so, concrete. You know what? I can make that with some melamine, some
it's easy.
tools, and a wheelbarrow. And, it's so ugly. The first piece is so ugly. Honestly, with how little I knew and how shitty the material was that I used, it actually turned out very well. And then, of course, she was like, so we did a coffee table first, and she's like, oh, okay, well, I want a dining room table. And I'm like, okay, that's a bit of a step up. Because, this is old school wet cast, so I'm doing a minimum 2 inches thick. So she wants, well, it needs to be able to sit 8 people. I'm like, okay. So a 4x8 table, 2 inches thick.
me think about
The
that.
melamine had sat outside leaning against the wall too long, so it was bowed. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, it'll be heavy enough. It'll weigh it down. Not heavy enough to weigh it down. So I've got a bowed tabletop now. And we still have it. It's still being used because I haven't had time to make a new one. And
Hey,
this
but
sucker
listen,
was
if
like,
you got a Hot Wheel, like you just roll.
you can. It's like if you get down even with it, I've even got shims underneath the other side. Like it is literally like this. It's beautiful
Been
as
there.
long as you don't notice that.
And 9 people out of 10 aren't going to.
Yeah.
It's weird.
And so the table, it had to have been like 600 pounds, just the top, not even with the base. So we've got like 13 people helping us pick this sucker up from the lanai and carrying it in and setting it in place. And we had a couple people here and there. We had somebody come in, was selling us like new sliding doors and bought the coffee table right out of our living room. And then we had a bunch of people here and there. There's like, oh, you should do it. And so then I went to Jeff's class, and then I just, everything that you were supposed to do, I was like, let's see what happens if I do the opposite of it. And that's how most of my finishes came to be, by calling up Jeff and Martin and taking their advice and doing the opposite.
Perfect.
I mean, staying within like certain guidelines, obviously, like the piece needed to be able to be transported and moved and hung up and those types of things. So it needed to actually be workable and usable. Yeah. But yeah, because like, you know, we guys that pop up every once in a while, they'll brag about this thing has thousands and thousands and thousands of fibers and you can't see any of them. And I'm like, that's stupid. It's like, what if I do it where I use nothing but fibers and just put that in the face and see what it... And I got like 3 finishes from it.
I love it.
And so, I don't know. Like, is it going to work when I start talking with designers? To be honest, I have no clue. Is it going to work in my area? Again, I have no clue.
You're in West
But I'm
Palm,
not
right?
out there, like, what is it, proselytizing, saying that, like, my way is the best way. This is how concrete should be done. It's definitely nothing like that. I'm very cautious with that because I don't want any of the newer guys coming in like I did and thinking like this is a guaranteed route to success. But at the same time, some of the things that I was told when I first got started, and I know you know these guys, so I'm not going to mention any names, but like the first things were, you're wasting your time doing the colors. Like, I haven't even been doing this for, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months, and I've already got somebody who's been in here for years telling me this. Like, that was a gnarly blow. And it's probably taken me 4 or 5 years to get over that.
You know, I think too, like, because when I talk to people, you should know I love colors. I mean, I've got a lot of black in here, but that's just because I like moody design. I think one of my favorite colors of concrete to make is light pink. And I do it all the time. And I mean, maybe this is just something I never got scared of colors. I don't get to do them as often as I want to. And what I would tell somebody new, rather than just saying, well, good luck with that, you know, it's like, well, do the colors you want to do, but know that most people aren't as adventurous as you are, and so there's going to be a lot of convincing, and that's okay. Like I've convinced clients to do. They had this is a really cool project, but they had like a concrete gray cabinet in the kitchen, and in direct line of sight was a navy blue cabinet in the bar. And I was like, all right, well, let's do a concrete gray on the navy blue, and let's do navy blue on the concrete gray. And they were like, sweet. And so I think a lot of it isn't about people's, you know, because a lot of people don't know what they want. And so if you can come in with confidence and say, this is going to look awesome, then yeah, you can do colors. But it takes a certain person to do that. Not everybody's going to be confident enough to say, you should do a navy blue countertop, or you should do, one of your finishes, which frankly, I've been an artisan for 10 years, and I I haven't experimented nearly as much as you have with finishes. So good on you for that.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's the fun part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't want to say it's stressful. It makes it sound more dramatic than it is, but you have to keep track of so much. Because it's just like the erosion finish that I have. That's the thing that people know of when they think of me. They think of the bright colors and the erosion finish, and I'll do it in one color, and of course most people will be like, "Oh, it's just over plasticized concrete," and in that case, it is. It is essentially just over. I mean, it's slightly more complicated than that, but not much. But then somebody will see a piece that's got 3, 4 colors in it, and then they'll be like, "Oh, it's just over plastic." I'm like, "You have lost your mind if you think it's that simple." Like, super red is incredibly difficult to over plasticize, and if you push it just a little bit too far, it just completely falls apart.
Well, and if you use too much of it, it's going to take a week for your concrete to cure.
Oh, yeah, I learned that out the hard way. I've got a corner of a sample that it was like a week old, and it was still
And
just
you're like,
kind of...
oh.
Yeah. And like warm gray, completely different than super blue, which is completely different than super yellow, which is completely different than titanium. It's just like...
Have fun using... you use too much carbon and then try to plasticize it. Like, it's not...
It's just... It's bonkers. So that's kind of where I'm at now, is I've finally planted my flag in the ground, and I know the type of pieces that I want to make. I know the type of people that I want to go after. We're going to start doing a lot more of the media side of things with the podcast, the 2 YouTube channels, and
well, if I could jump in and give some unsolicited advice, it is,
go ahead.
Don't market yourself the way I market myself, because it's not the same thing. You are I do consider myself an artist, but market yourself as kind of like, I would maybe go the route of Dylan Myers. Like,
yeah, I love the stuff that he's doing. I think he's doing a great job.
He's awesome. He probably needs to hear that he's doing a great job, because he gets hit occasionally, but he's awesome. But the way that he markets himself is, I'm an artist and you're paying me to do what I want to do. Yeah. And I think the type of work that you have put out, that's going to be your best tact, is to go to, an architect or a designer that's building 30 or 40 or $200 million buildings and saying, you want this? Because one of them will say yes, and you'll be doing, work at $400 a square foot, and that's what you want.
I don't know if I'll ever do the erosion finish in like a countertop. Do
wall art.
Oh, yeah.
Countertops.
Did you see the people, or the one that I posted just the other day of that sucker is bonkers.
Yeah.
It's 5/8 thick. I'll put it up on the screen whenever I go through and edit it, but it's 5/8 thick with an 1.5-inch thick border. It's up by a French cleat. And how big is it? It is 3 feet tall by 6 or 7 feet long. I mean, it's monstrous.
Oh yeah. No, that's man. I've made my living doing countertops, and if I could just do wall art, I'd be a happy boy.
It's definitely a different beast. I'll say that, because I have to make it vertical, and so getting everything to stay in place is a task. I'm using like 2x6s and 2x8s to keep this hydraulic pressure under control.
Oh, dude. The amount of times I have underestimated hydraulic or hydrostatic pressure, it's not good.
I had it happen once. Never again. Never again.
Oh, good for you. Listen, it's every time, because I'm like, this is going to be fine. No, it's not.
Yeah. I've gotten to where if it's if it's just a little bit longer than I'm comfortable with, I think 4 feet is probably my tops. I will not use anything small.
Time to break out I-beams.
Yeah, and like, cause it's and then it gets complicated. Where like, how are you gonna clamp them? I think cause like, so I don't know, and so that's just a work in progress. But
I love it.
I don't know. We'll see. Once I get all the pieces for the table saw in and everything gets
You
put
went
together.
saw stop. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
I don't have a table saw anymore. Fun fact.
What?
Yeah, I got rid of it.
You do everything with a track?
Festool, baby. Mm-hmm.
I'm too nitpicky. I just can't get it.
Oh, it's so much more accurate. Granted, my my table saw was a Jet from. It was awesome, but it was like 20 years old. And I mean the fit. No, it was pretty accurate, but you had to tune it. Mm-hmm. But this thing, I mean, some of the dimensions I'm cutting for this project I'm doing right now, like one of my measurements for the height of something is 28 and 9/30 seconds, and I mean it's accurate. You just have to know.
I'm
I mean,
more worried. How do you do
know,
right angles? How do you make sure that it stays at a right angle? So you cut one edge, and then you make sure that your second edge is 90 to that.
I mean, as long as the substrate that you're cutting on is flat, the saw's going to stay at a right angle. It's not like it's not wobbly.
Yeah, see, like my concern with, like, let's say I cut my first edge, and then I need another edge that's like, so you've got, let's just say you took a 3x6 rectangle, making sure that my 6th length edge is in 90 to my 3, like.
Well, you know that your track is a straight edge, right?
Yes.
So the easiest way to do that, there are a couple of ways you can do it. There's an attachment that actually slides onto the track that's a square. So you can do it that way. The other way that you can do it is I've got some clamps that slide into the track, and so what I'll do is I'll get one edge, on the line where I want it. I'll clamp it down, and then I'll square the track with a framing square, and then clamp the other side.
Yeah, see, because like
cross-cutting is so much easier. The only thing that, to me, the only thing that's more difficult with a Festool is ripping strips. Like everything else is far easier because you're not moving the sheet, you're moving the saw.
Yeah. Well, see, the thing is, and this might be where it's not as difficult for me, is I worked my ass off to get this saw, and
it's an awesome saw. No, congratulations. I'm not.
Oh
saying
well, no, it's like I say, like, because like when a guy, like, we had some shops here. Somebody posted some stuff in the forum, and their table saw went down, and they didn't have the reserves, and they had to go get a saw. I fortunately wasn't in that position, because I saved up for the saw that I wanted, and so I got the extension table on the one side.
Big boy saw stop.
Yeah, and I got the large industrial slider, like tube steel, the whole shebang. So I don't have to move. I'm not physically moving the sheet per se. I just put it on the slider, and the slider on the rails.
Okay,
just
see
move.
that is great because I never had a slider. I mean, I wasn't that cool.
Yeah. See, like, and that's why I got both the Festool Tracksaw. I got the 55 because
that's what I have.
I guess they're not making
the 75 is big. It's heavy. Jeff has the 75 and I've used it, and I prefer the 55. It's a lot easier to maneuver.
I knew that I needed to get at least the 55, and then the question was, what do I do for the bigger stuff? Because I wanna be able to do 8/4 lumber and then like 4-inch thick lumber. And so I showed him.
You have one of those skill saw, like.
Yeah, that's exactly what I showed him. It's like 16
so
and like
good.
5/16. I'm like, this sucker is just so
it's
America.
It's so good. I love it.
And so I'll probably end up getting one of those, to be honest.
Now, don't get me wrong, too. I as far as wood handling, I went the extra marathon, if you will, and in December I bought a CNC machine. So I'm
I
not
want
that
one
low
so
tech.
bad. I want one so
I've wanted one
bad.
for like 8 years, dude. It's awesome.
Yeah, like my opinion, and this could be completely wrong, is if you are in the woodworking industry and the concrete industry, if you do not have either one of two things, you either need to have a really good working relationship with a CNC shop, or you need to have your own. Period. End of statement. If you don't, you do not realize the times that we're in. Like, you are going to get left behind. Period.
Oh, I agree with that. I mean, and it showed itself with this project I'm working on right now. I've got some benches that, like, the back is kind of angled. It's like it's 98.13 degrees, so it's an 8.13 degree angle if you're talking about a chop saw. So it goes from 6 inches thick at the bottom to 2 inches thick at the top, and the corners are radiused. So obviously the bottom radius and the top radius are different. I have no idea how I would have done any of that without the CNC machine.
Yeah.
Because I can program it in Fusion all day long, but like cutting an 8-degree angle on a radius, but the radius changes at every height, like it was just not.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
it's definitely coming handy.
it blows my mind when, maybe that's not the best way to put it. It makes me a little scared or worried when people say or imply anything along the lines of, it's concrete, people will always want concrete. And I'm like, but will they? Because some of these other materials are catching up fast.
I think the key, because I mean, I've seen quartzite that looks like salt and pepper concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's a pretty good facsimile. So I think what people are always going to want is uniqueness.
Mm-hmm.
That, I think, is a statement you can make all day long. But the material, they don't care.
Yeah. There's a few people
They
out
don't
there.
care how you get there.
Yeah.
They care that you get there. And so, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. I think art will always be in demand, and artisans hopefully will be in demand for the foreseeable future. I think we went for a long time where it was better to get Formica from a factory than to get some craftsman to make it. But I think that's kind of making a resurgence, and my hope is that it kind of sticks around.
Yeah. I'm cautiously optimistic that that'll be the case. There, like we've seen a resurgent in like glass workers have started really doing some cool stuff again. Woodworking is really just taken off. My concern is that the barrier to entry in pretty much their main three categories, steel, wood, and concrete, has just become so low that it's going to muddy the waters. And then you get it to where the quality is not where it should be.
Yeah. I mean, I find most of my job's education, because you can always find somebody that's going to give you concrete for, $40 a square foot. Boone? I'm not. My dog. He's decided that now he's 8 and he's usually sleeping, and he's decided that now's the time he wants to make noise.
Everybody needs a shop dog, though.
Oh yeah, I've been bringing him to the shop for about six or 7 years now, and it's my favorite. Yeah, because concrete is not as easy as everybody thinks it is, and it's definitely not. Just because you can do flat work doesn't mean you can do this, and vice versa is true. I have no idea how to do flat work.
Yep.
So those of the artisans that are capable of both, like, that's awesome. I'm not there. But I don't think you can say, well, you can make a sidewalk, so you can definitely make this piece of art. Like, that's not. I think you need, and thankfully I'm in a good location for it, and Orlando was a good location for it. But Asheville, people care about art, and so, that. And the surrounding areas, the types of houses and things people build typically revolve around craftsmanship for the most part. And so I think I'm in a good market for it. And now remind me, you're in West Palm, right?
Over by Tampa.
Oh, okay. Well, I think you'll be just fine because Florida is ever growing.
It's just everything that they're doing with Tampa right now is just bonkers.
Have you done anything on Water Street? Because I really wanted some of that project.
No.
I didn't get it.
No, remember
It's
again,
all right.
too scared to go talk to designers. I haven't done shit for anybody.
Man.
That's why I'm talking to you. And that's why I need to get signed
I
on,
should
too.
introduce you to some of them.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
fun.
that's...
I
totally
like
okay.
marketing though, and that's part of, I think you have to get comfortable with it. But
Yeah, that's on my top of my list. But the main reason I'm not talking with anybody right now is because like the shop's down and out. Like you do have those lead times where you need to be talking to people ahead of time, but like I don't know when I don't know when the saw is going to be. Like we don't even have a date that it's going to be shipped. So I don't want to get into it.
You had all those boxes.
Yeah, I'm missing the slider.
Hold on. You're gonna have to edit this part out. So, okay, what have you like? I mean, excuse the directness of the question, but like, what have you been? I mean, you experiment a lot, and I've seen the work you've done for your house. So obviously, you have the portfolio to market because just tell somebody, hey,
A
come
couple
over.
people's, yeah.
But like, what is your day to day like? What's the general?
Well, here over the last week, things have been just, I don't want to say terrible because we'll say terrible. So we went to a kid's birthday party, and with a camera that we use for our personal stuff and the we use for the business is the same camera. Really nice camera. Sony A7 III, just in case anybody cares. And so we're at a kid's birthday party, and the really tall blow-up slides that has like a pit of water down at the bottom? Okay, so we're there doing that, and my oldest daughter, who's like almost 4, up at the top, losing her mind. Something happens where she gets pushed or something, and she's coming careening down this slide, like bouncing back and forth, lands in the water, okay? Doesn't know how to swim. Can't get up. The other kid who is behind her, little asshole, is coming down like 4 to 6 feet behind her.
Perfect.
Yeah. She hits the water, goes under, can't get up. He comes and lands directly on top of her. And he's just sitting there like, what's going on? So I'm the only one paying attention. All the other parents are over there drinking, which blows my mind, not paying attention. So my hand with the camera goes into the water, grab her with the other hand, so I'm holding myself and my child up with my camera and keeping her head above water. Okay. Take the camera out, take it apart as fast as I can, get the batteries out and all that kind of stuff. And we ship it off to see, can this sucker be repaired? Now, it's a long story just to say the YouTube side of things and us doing the videos of the builds and all that stuff to build up that side of the business is pretty much 100% on hold because I don't have the camera back yet. And then we have the other side that we're doing right now with trying to build up the podcast side and eventually trying to do sponsors, affiliate links, and all that good stuff. That's been hit or miss because people are just people, and it's really hard to schedule with anyone.
Right.
So that's been pretty much here and there on hold. And then we're waiting for all the pieces for the saw. Nothing can be made right now, so that is 100% on hold too. So that pretty much, there's nothing going on with anything, which is incredibly demoralizing. I don't have the strongest mental framework to begin with, so that's been a huge burden. But before that, we were selling orchid pots, and so that took up pretty much all of my time because that was that was kind of my weaning out way of like not talking with designers, but I was still able to sell plenty of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been making and selling orchid pots and plant pots for the past
Mm-hmm.
several months to be able to buy the better tools, because we had a DeWalt contractor saw, and that's what I was
Mm-hmm.
using to cut everything, and that thing was just trash for what
Mm-hmm.
we're doing. For just to
Sure.
clarify, for what, like, it's not accurate.
Sorry to
It's-
Walt.
Yeah, sorry DeWalt that you're never gonna watch this, but I know that there's some shops out there that use that. Like, there's some really big YouTubers that have the same saw that I have, and they make great things. But for what I want and need to make, it's just not accurate enough. And it's super dangerous when you're trying to put a 4x8 sheet across the top of that thing.
Been there. I was using
so-
the Makita contractor
Yep.
saw one time. I was like, this is not.
It's dangerous. So if you're out there and you're using one of those and doing that, you either need to get a
And you have all 10
Tracksaw.
fingers, like,
Yep.
fantastic for you.
Yeah, it's just you need to get away from that as quickly as possible. So that was pretty much what I was doing and I know a lot of guys in our industry kind of look down on that side of things.
If you
You
can
can
sell it and make money,
Yeah.
then why look down on it? I mean, you should see what I got on my casting table right now.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just some of the snobbery that's in our industry is a little disheartening.
I've been a part
But-
of that, I admit. But I'm working my way out of it.
Yeah, it can be hard. Like, it's almost like you're defending a part of yourself. Like, this is my opinion, and anything that maybe contradicts or is in conflict with that, almost need to push back against, which isn't necessarily true. But we're
Mhm.
humans, and that's kind of what we do. But that's what I was working on. That is how I was able to buy the Tracksaw, a Domino.
Oh, you have a
tracks.
Domino? I'm so jealous.
Yeah. I got the small one. I'll end up getting the big one, but I got the small one first because I have a project that needs that specific
God, I
one.
want one so bad.
But I got both of those, 2 tracks, the new table saw with the slider, with the extension table, with the fold out table, all the dominoes. We're getting the Festool, one of the vacuums, and I paid for all
Oh.
of that with pots.
Which vacuum did you order?
I haven't ordered one yet. I have to go on Wednesday to pick one out. So I've been asking people which one they recommend.
CT36. Go with the big boy, if you can.
I'll write that down.
So let me plug Festool for a minute. As you may or may not remember / know, back in August of last year, my shop flooded pretty dramatically.
Yep.
And there was no warning. It was wet and it had been raining all day, and I left at like 5:30, and I had heard that there were some flash flood warnings, but I come from Florida. I mean, I'm an 8th generation Floridian, so hurricanes don't compute to me.
Yep.
If it's not a category 4, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back to bed now. I hope some trees don't fall. And I don't want to be insensitive to the people who are on the coast, and that's a big deal for, but like in Orlando, a category 3 just didn't, it blew stuff around. It wasn't,
It's the same thing over
nearly
here.
the catastrophic damage that a big hurricane on the coast is. So I grew up not being fearful. I respect them, but I'm not fearful of them. And so when I hear a tropical storm, the remnants of a tropical storm is going to come through the mountains, I'm like, okay, it's going to rain. So,
You get desensitized.
oh yeah, but what I failed to realize is that I'm a block away from a river. And we're in the mountains, so if we get a lot of rain up high, guess where it's going to come? And so the river, it was Tropical Storm Fred, and the river, the normal levels are 2 feet. Flood stage is 10 feet, which is that's minor flood stage, so some people are going to get a little bit of water. The river was at 20 feet. So my shop had 6 feet of water in it, and I'm a block away from the river. And running water. So they're like my trailers were 70 feet from where I left them. My compressor was upside down. Like the cabinets that held my chop saw were just, they fell over. I've got a big Milwaukee pack out that I do all my install stuff in, and it was somewhere on top of something else. Like it was crazy. All of that to say, sorry, my administrative director is in, and I was like, you need to be quiet. So she's like slowly opening the door. And all of that to say, my Festool, like I had just used it to rip some stuff, so I hadn't even put it back in the boxes. The vacuum and the saw were just sitting on top of each other where I had left them. The saw, I dried out, used some parts cleaner, like took it apart, all of that. I'll shout out here to Fluid Form Concrete in Brevard. They're about 45 minutes from me. Harvest Laser is his name. Awesome guys, both the guys that work there, and they actually took a day and they came up to my shop and helped me clean tools. So the camaraderie is on point. Love those guys. But anyway, the Festool has not skipped a beat. The saw died after about 6 months after the flood. Right at about 6 months after the flood. I was on an install and the vacuum died. It's like, oh crap. And I was just out of warranty, but even so, I was like, well, nobody's going to cover a flood. Like, I didn't. And so I called Festool's customer service, and I told them what happened. I'm like, listen, I know this is going to be out of warranty. It's like barely under warranty or just out or whatever, but like it died. Here's why. And they go, well, send it in, and we'll look at it, and we'll just send you an invoice, and you can pay it and whatever. I send it off. They send me a box. I send off the head, because obviously nobody cares about the tub. So the motor part. And about a week and a half later, I get an invoice for $0. They repaired it and sent it back to me on their dime and didn't ask a single question. So their customer service is unbelievable.
I've heard that from many people.
So I recognize that the vacuum is $900, or it was when I bought it 2 years ago. So it's probably $8,000 now with,
Yeah.
current
Let's
state
just
of
say
affairs.
it's
But-
more than that now.
Yeah. But it's worth every penny. It really, really is. I use the bags. I don't just let it fill up, and it's the greatest thing of all time. I mean, I've ripped up multiple sheets of melamine in a day and had enough dust to like fit in the palms of my hand. It's dumb how much it collects.
Yeah.
So highly.
I know that
recommend.
I'm getting one. It was just like they have so many.
I like the big
trick
one.
is just
I
airing
just went with the biggest vacuum I could, and I'm happy that I did.
Yeah. We were talking about something else before that, but I don't remember why we was talking about like the flood.
orchid
What I was
plants.
doing before that. You had asked me.
What's your wife do?
question of? She is a. What would you? I guess you'd call him an account manager for Better Up. It's a company that sells B2B for. It's not counseling. I don't know what I'm allowed to say. What is the technical term for it? Like they patch up. They match up employees with like business coaches, and the coaches range from health related type stuff, like sleep, nutrition, stress, like working parents with kids, to sales coaches and having difficult conversations and that type of stuff. So she's a fancy smancy account manager with them, which is very impressive. But for what I'm doing, it has been a huge what's a good word for it? It has removed a lot of that necessity to go and make something. I don't know if that makes sense, because like we live a comfortable life. I'm not gonna lie. She makes very good money. We've been able to do a lot of stuff for and with our kids, and that has been great. But it comes with a cost. And some people are better at handling that cost than others. It just so turns out that I'm not the type of person who handles that very well at all. Um, and so that burning need, like if you're the primary breadwinner, for example, and you need to make $1, you have that fire that's just kind of inherent in that situation. And we've just gotten to where it's things are comfortable. And that is very difficult for me. Other people maybe not so much, to work myself out of. And because I didn't grow up with a structure of self-discipline and working, because I was an only child and I pretty much got whatever I wanted, which is terrible. So if you only have one
Don't
kid,
do that to your kids.
don't do that. Like you think you're doing something for your kids, like the burden that you're placing on them for in the future is just terrible. Maybe that's not necessary to tell people, but whatever, they can get over it. But
It's your podcast.
so it doesn't feel that way.
And I
feel
agree
like I'm
with
being
you.
interviewed here.
Well, sorry
So
if you got questions for me.
No, you're good, because I want this to be more of a conversation, and people can glean whatever they want or need out of this. It is what it is. But that's kind of the hole that I'm digging myself out of, and it has been long. It's not been fun, and so I'm kind of trying to piece everything together as I go along.
Yeah,
And
I think if you're gonna get out there, like, you need to come out swinging in terms of, just because if you want to do the types of things that you've been doing, you're gonna have to be really expensive. And I just suggest that it's a lot easier to come out high than it is to work your way up.
Yeah, that's what Martin has been preaching about to me for the past 2 years now.
You're gonna find Martin and I agree on quite a lot.
Yeah. Oh no, and fortunately, I don't disagree with anything that I've been told. Like, it's for two reasons. One, it makes perfect sense, and two, I'm not at a point to disagree. So both of those two things work in concert with one another. But I've made enough pieces to where I know that, like, the amount of time it takes me, like, even if you were to take the exact same square footage for a countertop
You pop that
and
out
you were to flip it on its side,
10th.
it's just the amount of time that I even just putting into the mold, like, nothing else. The mold takes me, I don't know, triple, quadruple the amount of time, just because sometimes you have to build a frame to make sure that the mold doesn't explode. It's just, so I understand logically where he's coming from with a lot of those things, and he's been a lifesaver. Like, it's not against
And he
anybody
makes
else.
some really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, it's not against anybody else in our industry. But he has been there for me like no one else. And I don't know that I would have made it to just this point, however low it may or may not be, without him. And that's why anybody who asks me, like, find a school, whichever school it is, and go to it. The community that you will gain access to is just, you can't put a price on it.
I have preached that and preached that, so thank you.
I don't know that people understand that.
Yeah, I mean, and not because I now teach for one of them. Like, I've preached that since long before I made money doing it. Because, yeah, the community is insane. And regardless of which school you attend, I'm of course going to advocate for CCI because I teach for them. And I teach for them because I believe in, why they do it. So it's not just because I make money occasionally teaching. I really do believe in what I know Jeff's heart in why he does it. And so I really believe in that, as I imagine you do as well. That said, I'm not going to bash somebody
You can
else.
mention everybody, other people if you want. It's fine.
Well, there are two schools, right? There's Concrete Design School and there's CCI, and I have chosen to put my flag in the CCI camp, not because I dislike the other guys, not because I don't think they're doing good stuff. I think that I think the engineering aspect of it is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And to be fair, I gleaned a lot. I mean, a lot of who I am is because Jeff mentored me. A lot of the artist that I am is because, there is that foundation of structural engineering that I can fall back on. And so while, and I admit that I'm pushing the previous envelope towards what I hope to be sexier pieces, because I do think that's important. And I think that's something that John and Brandon and Dusty do very well. And so, that's definitely an aim that I have for the pieces that come out of, some of the CCI stuff. We've been doing this, right? Like, I was the driving force behind that ridiculous conference table that we made in my shop. And the whole point of it was I don't want it to look like it's possible, right? Like I wanted, and I would probably go a little bit crazier with it the next time. But so I have been trying, and I think it's worked well, because CCI, we made a lounge chair when I was, did we make a lounge chair? We made a really cool table. I don't remember. But lounge chairs have been being made for years, and they're friggin' awesome. And so that's something that we've been doing for a few years. At the Ultimates at my shop is a lounge chair. We did a rocking Adirondack chair last time. We did a sofa the time before that. I've been teaching some of my marbling technique, which I'll plug again. We're about to release some things surrounding that. I don't know what I'm allowed to. I don't know if it's been posted yet or not, but be on the lookout for.
Let me know when it goes live, and I'll put something up.
I will. I'm excited about it. And so all of that to say, I have a very, I want Jeff's engineering to come through first and foremost, because I think that is the foundation that allowed me to do what I've done. Mm-hmm. And I think that is extremely, extremely important, to have the understanding of why concrete acts the way it does in certain circumstances. Mm-hmm. I don't think you can just throw a grenade at a wall and hope that the explosion turns into, some pretty pattern. Like, I think you need to know. I think you need to know why. And so I think that's where the value in CCI comes from, is the fact that, Jeff is a professional engineer by trade and was in the concrete, kind of area when he was a civilian contractor for the Navy. All of those things create very reliable concrete, and I think that foundation is the reason that I've kind of hitched my cart to that horse.
That was the same reason that I went to. I wanted to know why. Yeah. Because I don't know. Again, I'll put pictures up on the screen or whatever so people can see, but like, I push concrete maybe a little bit further than it should.
I get it. I do that too.
And so, like, I wanted to make sure that I could do crazy things and
be able to rely on it.
Yeah. And because, like, you do have to be careful with, like, when you're, like, if you push concrete a little bit too far, you have to make sure that it stays together or that it doesn't fall apart. And so those are kind of things that you have to be mindful of. But I've just, over the years, I've been blown away with how patient he is with people. Mm-hmm. The amount of patience that man has with, like, the questions that have been asked over and over is just mind-blowing to me. Like, I'd lose my mind if I if I went through that as many times as he has. So his patience is something that has always been very admirable.
So I guess all of that to say, because I'm not in anything to start a war, you know, and I do think that I'm absolutely sure that the folks that attend concrete design school get value out of it. So I don't, and I've never been, so I can't speak to what happens there.
Right.
I can speak to what happens at a CCI Ultimate class, and you know, and I can speak to the reason that I chose to, like I said, hitch my cart to that horse. And it really is because I believe in it. So my advocation, yeah, I mean, I teach for them and I get paid for it. So take that with whatever grain of salt you want to, you know, to take. But I would and have done it for free. Would do and have done.
Say that you need to find a class, a reputable class, wherever you are in the world, and you need to plug into that class. That's just my take on it.
I agree. I very much.
I mean,
agree.
I don't think even if you just gain access to the community, that's worth it. I spent a whole lot of time on that. But you got to hear my story, so it's your time to tell me yours, because I've gotten to hear and seen parts of it here and there, but I've never seen it in one succinct timeline.
Sure. So I'll back up a little bit. So I'm going to back up a lot a bit, actually, for a very brief period. My dad has been an attorney my whole life. He's actually just a couple of months ago announced his retirement from the Florida Supreme Court. And so that his career has very much informed a lot of how I think and a lot of who I am. And from a very young age, I expressed a desire to become an attorney, and that didn't really change until my senior year of college. So from literally the time I was like 4 until my senior year of college, I wanted to be an attorney. And so I was a political science major at UCF. You can finish, but it takes a long time. And I did that. I never changed my major. I was poli-sci the whole time. And I took my LSAT, law school admission test. And honest to God, I didn't even wait for the results. I walked out and something didn't feel right. I don't really know how to explain that, but I called my dad and I was like, I don't know if I'm supposed to do this. Which is weird because my whole life has kind of been geared towards that. Mm-hmm. And so I was trying to figure all of that out, right? And I was working for a friend's dad's company, not doing anything related to anything that mattered. So right after I graduated college, I went on. My parents do a ton of mission work in Honduras. My mom at the time spent about 6 months of the year over there, working with an organization called Mi Esperanza, and they do vocational training for underprivileged women who don't have a ton of education and typically have a lot of kids. So they're essentially training them in ways to support their families, because a lot of times there's no dad in the picture. And so my mom does a ton of work over there, and dad goes with her, and because of his job, there was a lot of involvement, but he couldn't really advertise it too much. Dad was over there every summer. Mom was over there about 6 months a year, and so all of that to say, I went over for a few weeks, and it was there that I met my wife, who lives in Canton, she was from Canton, North Carolina, and she was working for a church over there as a missionary teacher. And I literally met her in church in Tegucigalpa, Honduras. And it was somewhat of a whirlwind. We met in May, got engaged in October. and we're married the following June, 3 days before our first anniversary. So in the midst of that, just a bit, we've been married for 9 years now and have twin 5-year-old boys. So yet again, the whirlwind continues. And it's been awesome. But all of that to say, I found myself in a serious relationship fairly quickly and engaged fairly quickly. And the path that I had kind of forged for myself my whole life was gone. And so you'll find a lot of church connections. The gentleman who started my company as Price Concrete Studio back in 2003, his wife was my dad's running partner. So they trained for marathons together. And so we were really close with their family. And we knew that Chuck Price Concrete Studio, was looking to call it divest and go into custom home building, spec home building really. He was a framer by trade and had some relationships with some high-end builders, and so he wanted to go do that. But he didn't want to shut the business down entirely because there was a market for it. And so long story short, I ended up, I've always liked to work with my hands. I like to work on cars, and I don't really know how that translates, but here we are. It translated in the mind of most of my family somehow, and I find that kind of funny. They're like, well, you like to work with your hands. You should go work with concrete. And I'm like, I don't even know what concrete is. Like, don't. It's a sidewalk. And so being the adventurous risk taker that I am, I said, sure, let's try this. And so I called Chuck and I said, more or less, I was like, hey, you want somebody to manage your company? As long as you teach me, I could do that. And he took a little while to decide, but then he came back with yes, which is weird. Like, a little bit. Who does that? Who says, yeah, this kid just graduated from college. I'm gonna trust him. He's got no skills.
Yeah.
But he did. And so what I get when I get into the shop the first day is, here's my mix design, and it's just an Excel spreadsheet, and it's in cubic inches, mind you. It's not in square feet at all. So, if I'm doing a 2-inch thick island that's 7 feet long and 4 feet wide, I've got to, do it all in inches by 2 inches, and there's my volume that I put into the spreadsheet, right? And I actually was referring to that spreadsheet on Friday to figure out some volume for something, which I find very funny because this is from like 2005, right? And he hands me like a set, here's like a USB drive of all of his colors, and he's like, well, spend this week making samples. That's how you're going to learn. And then he leaves. All right. And meanwhile, I've got a guy. I inherited a guy. His name was Alan Gegenheimer. And Alan, God bless him, and maybe God rest him, because I've never seen somebody drink so much, he was drunk at all times. And he lived at the shop. Like in the little tiny 3-foot or 4-foot wide by maybe 10-foot long office, he had a king-size Tempur-Pedic mattress wedged in a taco between the wall and the desk, and that's where he slept.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so, to the point where I walked in one morning, and he drank Steel Reserve. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that beverage. Go to any drugstore on a not great side of town, not drugstore, convenience store, and it is like a 4-pack is like $3.84, and they're tall boys, and they're not low gravity. They're like malted beer something. They're awful. I've never tasted anything so bad in my life. But anyway, that's what Alan drank. He drank a lot of them. 7 or 8 of them a day. Yeah, it's not good. And he started whenever he woke up, which sometimes was noon, sometimes was 7 a.m., sometimes he didn't go to sleep. One time I woke up, or one time I got into the shop, and he had rebuilt a V8 motor out of a boat in the shop while I was gone the night before. And it ran perfectly. The man was talented. And so that's the guy I inherited like one time I walked in, and I know I'm getting on a tangent, but I walked in and he had a Chick-fil-A cup, like a large Chick-fil-A cup, and I'm like, this is the day. Alan is not drinking. It's amazing. And I'm like, Alan, what's in your cup? And he pulls the lid off, and there's a can of Steel Reserve under the lid with a straw through it. I'm like, oh. So that's what I inherited. I inherited Chuck, who I love to this day, but he was absentee, all right? He's like, here's your spreadsheet. Have fun. And then I had Alan. And Alan did not respect me. And I don't know if he knew what day it was.
It's a winning combination.
It was great. So that was my start in the concrete industry. And mind you, meanwhile, Chuck is absent. And I have, I don't know if you're familiar with the fact that Disney has a neighborhood. But
Yes.
they do. It's called Golden Oak. And that's the kind of client Chuck had. It's like one of my first jobs was in Golden Oak. And I had no idea what I was doing. And so, he's feeding me jobs because he's still got calls and stuff. So he's feeding me jobs from, homes that are from anywhere from $1 million to $10 million homes. And I have exactly no idea what I'm doing. And so I sort of took over, would have been in, call it June, maybe July of 12. And my wife and I, Lauren and I, got married in June of 13. Somewhere around March of 13, I bought the company off of Chuck. I still had no clue what I was doing, but I realized that I wasn't going to get much else out of him training-wise, and I was having to pay him 15% of everything I made, and I wasn't that great with money, and so I'm like, okay, we're just going to have to cut. I'm just going to figure out a way to buy it, and then I can at least keep all my money. And so I'm doing all these jobs, wet cast. I remember almost killing a couple of my friends flipping a big island because I have never been one to do small things. And that continues to this day. I like to do very large pieces of concrete.
That's where it's at.
Yeah, and so October of 13 rolls around. Lauren has given me the lovely ultimatum, which I needed. Because she was a teacher and we were living on her income, which was glad we didn't have any kids. And she was like, listen, bud, you got 6 months to get this okay, like provide, I don't know, some sort of income, or you can go get like a real job.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, a real job. And so I kind of gave Chuck an ultimatum. I called him and I was like, you agreed to teach me and you didn't do that and I'm dying. And he, in his typical nonchalant manner, he's basically like, I don't have the time, like, love you and all that, but can't do it. But there is this guy. He's in Raleigh. I've consulted with him over the years. He's great. You should go take one of his classes. Okay. So I looked up the Concrete Countertop Institute, and I got on the phone with Lane, and like, I don't know if they still do this or not. I think they do, but there was like an interview process to go to the class, and so I had to do that.
It's more of a phone now. I don't remember if I had like an actual phone call.
Well, it was an interview at the time. So I did that, and they, accepted me, and I went to the ultimate class in October of 2013. So I'd been married, some few months, and I went into CCI having no idea what GFRC meant. Like, I didn't know what GFRC was. For those of you watching who may not be into concrete, it's glass fiber reinforced concrete. I asked the question. I'm like, all these guys are talking about GFRC, and I'm like, guys, I'm sorry, what is GFRC? Brett Carriger and Dylan Myers were in my class, so that was a fun group.
Yeah.
God, I love those
That
guys.
was interesting.
It was Dylan. This is funny. Dylan had like the week prior, basically run his thumb through a table saw, like the end of his thumb. So and so he's all like bandaged up with this super fat
He would be.
thing. Yeah, and I mean Dylan is exactly who Dylan is at all times, and it's the greatest thing. So it was a really fun class, but I came back and I had a wet cast kitchen island that it was in two pieces, but each half was 7 by 5 and 2.5 inches thick. So each half weighed like 1,500 pounds, and so I had that to install the week I got back, which sucked because I realized I was like, oh my god, I could have done this like the whole thing in one piece, and it could have been like 500 pounds total. So I converted immediately to GFRC. Naturally, I got a job in the Bahamas right after I got back from CCI. That went well. I have failed miserably a few times, let me tell you.
The whirlwind continues.
Oh, it does. All of it to say, I dove in head first, and I never really came up for air. Not 100% sure I've ever come up for air. But I've had the distinct privilege of doing work for some really high-end clients, some really cool commercial projects. I literally am not allowed to use this for advertising purposes, so I won't. But I got to make all of the syncs at both Disneyland and Disney World for the new Star Wars areas. So that was a really fun project to be a part of because I got to meet some of the Imagineers. I got to go to the park before it opened. They had like sealers and finishes picked out. I was like, I'm not doing that. And so it was really neat to be able to kind of collaborate with them on the stains and the sealers and how we were going to make it and the product and all of that. And then I got to take Lauren to the contractor opening of the park, which was really fun. And so I think certainly learning in the way that I learned and diving into the deep end and then going to CCI allowed me to kind of open the door for a lot of really, really cool projects that I'm really grateful to have been a part of. Certainly hasn't been easy. And then did all of that in Orlando until 2020, when everybody thought it's a great idea to move your business and your family out of state in the middle of 2020. We moved in September of 2020, so that's fun. And then, I realized too, I was like, I did not build a business. I kept one alive. Not the same thing. And so when I got here and realized I need to build a whole new clientele that needs to be every bit as high-end as the one I'm used to working in, that took some doing. And it took a lot of cold calling. Thankfully, the community here is really, really cool. Harvest from Fluid Form has been incredible. He's passed me some work when I did not have much. So I attribute a lot of the fact that I'm still in business to the community. I'm super grateful for that.
He's a really nice guy.
Yeah, he's awesome. We're getting to the point where we're both too busy to take work, and I'm like, I don't know what we're going to do now because I would normally pass work back to him, but he's still sending stuff my way, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. So we'll figure that out. I've actually talked to him about doing some projects together, which I think would be a really, really fun kind of adventure. And that's one of the things I really love about the community too is we're not, it seems to me that the bent of most artisans in our little mini industry is that if we all make really good concrete, then we're all going to do well. And so there's not to the degree that there is in some other trades, there's not the competition. I look at, there are a couple of guys in my area, Harvest being one of them, and I look at it and I say, okay, well, if they're doing good work, then all of us look good. So as long as they're doing good work, it's okay that I didn't do it. It's fine. And I think that's something that's pretty unique. But anyway, so moved in 2020, rented a much smaller studio space in downtown Canton. So we're just outside of Asheville, right across the road from a paper mill. It's a really funky, fun little town. The paper mill really doesn't smell, actually.
Oh, that's good.
Very often. On occasion, like if the weather's kind of changing, it will. If it's about to snow, it smells a little bit. So there are some kind of funny things you learn when you move into a paper mill town. But it's unusual in that, unlike most paper mill towns, the paper mill is literally in downtown. Like hang on. There it is.
Oh, man.
So it's right here. And I think, because it's right in town, they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars making sure that the river that runs below it is clean, the steam that comes out doesn't smell as much as is possible. So it's not unpleasant at all to have a beer at the brewery outside.
Oh, man, that must be nice. There's one that's, I don't remember where it is. It's like on the way to Georgia or something like that. Man, you can smell it when you get close.
Oh, yeah,
It's
miles away. The one going on 95 through Jacksonville?
I think so, yeah.
Horrible.
It's just brutal.
It's so bad. So it's not bad. This is Evergreen. It's the company that owns it. So I think they make cups for Starbucks. Like they're a fairly large company.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so it's a plucky little town, and I think I kind of reaffirmed why Lauren's from here, so that's why we moved here. But reaffirmed kind of what we wanted when the flood hit, because August of 21. That flood came through, 6 feet of water. And the local, there's like one nicer restaurant in town. It's called the Southern Porch. They do elevated Southern cuisine. It's really, really good. We eat there a lot. And we know the owners, like one of the owners went to school with Lauren. And so it's a very small, tight-knit community. And I had 7 inches of mud inside the shop and probably 12 in the parking lot, and stuff was everywhere. And I don't think the town had power. I'm not sure. Yeah, they did, but we couldn't use the water so they couldn't open the restaurant because the water wasn't potable. And so instead of just letting that be that, they and most of the other businesses around town decided, we're going to pay our staff to come in anyway, and we're going to go help people clean. And so I had the whole staff of the Southern Porch at my shop for like 3 days cleaning.
Damn.
And so that's the kind of community that we live in. And so that's one of the reasons that I love it here. But yeah, so that's, I guess, a really nutshelled version of my story. I started teaching for CCI, or I started helping Jeff with classes, I want to say in 16 or 17, I think 17. I went and helped him with one, and then it was so much fun. I got the distinct, again, pleasure and honor to help with another one where Buddy Rhodes was also teaching. And so I got to hang out with Buddy for a week. What a freaking cool guy. And so it's been, like you've said and like I've said, it's been a whirlwind, but it's been a hell of a time. It's been a ton of fun.
Yeah, looking at it from the outside, and not, it's so easy to disregard the backstory or the day-to-day minutia that you go through. Even after hearing anybody's story, it's still almost a little has a nice glossy coat on the outside of it, it's the highlights. It's the, I ran into, my shop flooded and then it turned out great. And then it's oh, well, good for you,
Yeah, and people don't think about the, you know, I mean, it took, gosh, I'm going to make my admin give me a funny face because Kate is her name, and she's sitting across from me, but she had just spent it was her first week. She's giving me a look right now. It was her first week. She spent the entire week, getting the showroom ready to put furniture in, right? Sealed the floors, cleaned the windows. It was immaculate. The day she finished that was the day it flooded. And so, it took us, what, Kate, 3.5 weeks to get the mud out of the shop?
Oh, yeah.
Took us 3 weeks to get the mud out of the shop. It happened in August. I think I had a job that, thank God, the pieces survived the flood. And I installed that job, and I don't think I did another job till January. And mind you, my wife doesn't work. She's a stay-at-home mom to our sweet sons, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And but there was no other income, and we didn't have work really at all from August until mid-January. We did have a class, and I don't know how we did this, but we did have a CCI class in October here. And you should have seen the power situation. We had temporary power, but what that means is I had 200 amps. No, I didn't. I had the service coming from town, but they disconnected my meter. So what I did, I had a 30 amp breaker and a 2-outlet guy, and then I think I had a 220, so I could run the compressor. And I took the 30 amp. I bought an RV, a 30 amp RV plug, and I wired it into a bank of 10 outlets that I mounted to the wall next to the compressor. And I ran everything. So I ran Romex over the shop, and I powered another bank of outlets off of the same circuit. So I had 30 outlets powered off the same circuit. And then I ended up running, I butchered a couple of extension cords and ran them inside and from the temporary box, and probably illegally powered a few more outlets and the lights for the bathroom and the refrigerator. And then it was just cobbled together. The fact that we were able to hold a CCI class and it looked semi-normal, and we made a couch, was a bit ridiculous. I didn't get actual my meter was reset. We had to rebuild the whole service and move it 10 feet off the ground. So there's platforms all around the building now where all the electrical stuff is. I didn't get my meter set until Christmas. So I didn't have full power again until Christmas. And so I think, to your point of people skipping, kind of skipping over the high points, doesn't do justice to the difficulty that all of us go through. I mean, certainly I had a flood, and I don't want to discount that, but also everything's relative. And so I guess my point is everybody, don't skip the low parts, because that's so much of who most people are.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because even I think that's what I'm gonna try and really get people to talk about when they're coming through and saying their story is if you skip over the parts that were shitty and terrible and sucked, it's no different than somebody just glossing over your Instagram reel.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, life is not Instagram. I mean, that's the thing, is you can make it look awesome, and a lot of times it is, but a lot of times it's not. And I mean, we relied on when the flood hit, and certainly for several months thereafter, we relied on. My sister set up a GoFundMe, and I'm so grateful for that, because that, allowed us to have groceries until we had work again. And I'm also super great. A lot of my tools inexplicably survived. I lost most of my battery tools, but a lot of the power tools are okay, which is crazy. but I mean, you know, losing that much work and relying on the generosity of others for a time is very humbling. And I think it's really important to the story, and I think it's really important to everybody's story to kind of lean into those the hard times, because those are what really define you. It's not, you know, anybody can be cool and good during a good time, but it's the hard times that define you.
Yeah. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. Is when you talked about how you got started in Orlando, you bought an existing company that kind of had its feet underneath it already, and
Absolutely.
and then I think I would assume, maybe incorrectly, but I would assume that most people, probably upwards of 80% easily, wouldn't be able to relate to that.
Sure.
Because, well, a lot of people, it's just weird. It's so weird. Our industry is just so wonky this way, where, like, so many people start off in their garage. Like, they needed to build something, so they made it, and then they got the bug, I guess is the way that it's been kind of described.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, I think, could really connect with when you move to North Carolina. Like,
Yeah, I have actually found that experience to be super useful, especially in class, because you're absolutely right. It's what I did to start out was pretty unrelatable. And I don't want to discount that gave me a huge leg up. It really did. But yeah, moving to North Carolina, I underestimated, like, it's like, oh, this will be fine. And I really tried to do, I tried to do both. I kind of tried to have my cake and eat it too. I didn't close my shop in Orlando when I moved. I had a shop manager, and I didn't do very much here initially. I would leave on Tuesday and come back on Friday and have Monday and maybe part of Tuesday in the shop for most of, I guess about 9 months I did that. And maybe when Lauren hears this, she's going to be like, no, Caleb, it was. And I don't know. I mean, I'm terrible at estimating time. But I think it was about 9 months. And during that time, I mean, it was horrible. My shop manager ended up, and I don't blame him, I really don't, but this wasn't what he wanted, and that communication was not made. And so his quitting essentially forced me to say, well, Orlando's over. All in the midst of let me think about this. That would have been February. I think that was February of 21. So I moved in August, fully in September. It was September 1st when we got here. So late August moved. And then from then until middle of March or late February, I actually officially closed in March. But that I was trying to do the whole back and forth thing. I'm thinking, okay, well, we designed a black label logo, which is actually what's on my shirt. I'll plug my designer, Chaz Russo, who does incredible branding work. So we designed a black label logo, and the idea was the black label will be here, the more production stuff will be there, it'll be awesome. That's not how that worked at all. And in March, I was forced to totally close the Orlando shop a week after we had hosted a CCI class. And so, yeah, this really was starting over. I didn't have a single client in Asheville, and I hadn't really spent any time developing that because I had so much work still in Orlando that I was so back and forth and trying to do all of that I didn't even have time to develop the clientele. And thankfully I had an advantage of knowing what I was doing as far as the product was concerned when I did finally get around to starting to talk to people. But, it was, that happened, and then I was still sort of doing a bunch of stuff in Florida. And then literally the flood hit, and that was kind of the cut the head off the beast situation of I can't do most of my work in Florida anymore. I really shouldn't have been doing it in the beginning, but it was the work I had, so I did it. And so the flood was kind of an oh shit, wake up, come to Jesus moment of you have to be where you are, and there's literally no other option. And I mean, and so that was hard too, because I'm literally rebuilding a physical business in the midst of trying to build, a book of business. And so I didn't have much mental capacity for that at all. And it wasn't really until, I guess, November and December, when the shop was semi-functional and workable, and that I started cold calling and emailing folks locally. And it really reinforced the idea that as an artisan, you're unlikely to step on other people's toes, even in a close industry. I mean, you're not too far from Jake Brady, and I bet you've never run into him, and maybe never will. I think in the 8.5 years I was in Florida, Jake and I competitively bid like one job. So it's fascinating to me how close you can be in geography and really never run into another artisan, because what we do is so niche.
Yeah, he and I are quite different. So, and we've talked several times. Like, yeah, I love Jake. He's awesome.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Really, really great. I mean, and that's the thing you'll find is everybody's awesome. And so, yeah, it was a couple of months of, I cold called, cold emailed, literally, and this is just me. I think Kate did. She has a spreadsheet of how many she did, but I personally cold called and emailed probably 250, 300 people in that span. And some of them just took. We had a couple of a few of them were like, thanks, so much for the info. I'll pass it on to the estimation team. And some of them, we had one or two, one that I can think of in particular that was like, this is weird, but we've got a job that we would love for you to bid on.
I had that exact same thing happen, yeah. It's so weird.
And so that was amazing because I really needed the work. And so it was really in middle of January. So August is the flood, and then middle of January was when we kind of picked back up to the normal kind of rhythm of projects. And so it was a long road, and I think too, it gave me a lot of ammunition for class, because of all of that, I now have a decent book of business and client base here locally, that was really cool. I didn't take from anybody else. It was like people that didn't know about the other guys. I mean, it's a really neat kind of thing, because and a couple of them I have made sure, like, I don't want to steal work from anybody because there's enough for everybody. And I would rather, if you're going to do the work well, I'd rather you do it because they're your client. I'll do it if you want me to. But a lot of the clients I've gotten, like, just hadn't found the other guys. And that's awesome. Just means there's work for everybody. Reinforces that idea. And I was able to, because of that, talk with a lot more authority on the subject to the students in our most recent 2 classes here. But then also in the most recent one, I was able to, one of the architects I've been working with, I called him, I was like, hey, Mark, you want to come in and talk about this relationship and why it's important to these students who are going to then go home and try to develop these things? And he was like, that's awesome. And so we were able to do that, which was really neat. And I think that's something that I could not have done had I stayed in Orlando with a business that I bought rather than built.
Right. So getting into the really nitty gritty. So let's take it from the very, very beginning. So what is the methodology of finding the initial people that you're even going to call? Because I called 250 people. Okay. How did you find those people? How do you narrow it down? Because concrete in and of itself starts off at a bit higher price point. So,
Mhm.
so right off the bat, you already have to know that there's certain designers that, I don't know of a nice way of putting it. It's not to insult anyone, but like certain designers don't do work with people who do X amount per square foot or whatever. So,
Well, listen, if you're going to Home Depot for your cabinets or your countertops, you're not my client. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because I don't at all look down on anybody who goes to Home Depot or Lowe's for their countertops or their cabinets. It's just not what we're looking for as artisans, because that's a level of craftsmanship that is a little bit more commodity, and that's fine. So the way I look at it is, I will go online or first I start online, and I Google like the area's top 10 interior designers. I start there. The ones that have been in Dwell or Architectural Digest or whatever award-winning, like those, that's generally who I start with. I do the same thing for architects. I do the same thing for builders. And that's what I kind of figure, and this is going to be more of a procedural thing, but if artisans are listening, maybe this is helpful. I figure generally, if you're looking for work now, your best bet is a builder. It may not be the work that you like, but it's quicker because they are in the project and they need somebody. If you need work in 6 months, talk to an interior designer, because they are working on a project that is a few months out. It hasn't started construction yet, most likely. If they need you right now, something probably happened in the design phase that they were not anticipating. Maybe the client switched surface, or the client switched designs on them last minute, or the fabricator they had dropped out, or whatever the case may be. But the likelihood that you're going to get a designer to give you work right this second is pretty low. And then if you're wanting to fill the pipeline for next year, or 5 years from now, or 2 years from now, talk to an architect. And so I generally try to be in relationships with all of those fields. And I've become friends with a lot of them, so it's gone past transactional. But I think the big thing for me is I want the architect or the designer or the builder to know that my goal is to be there for them as needed. So, I encourage them to, if they have something that they don't know how to do, or they don't, they don't know who, or how to accomplish the goal, or whatever the case might be, ask me about it, because the likelihood is, even if I haven't done it before, it's a challenge I'm willing to take on. So it's kind of billing yourself as somebody who's willing to experiment in order to achieve the goal of a client. So my first bathtub ever, which is, why did I do this? It came out really cool, but I generally do stupid things for fun. And so my first bathtub ever, I had a client call me. Turns out it was an interior designer that I ended up working for a lot later, but I never made the connection until far later. But a builder called me, and they were like, I've got a client, we're building this house. She wants a concrete bathtub. Can you do it? And they hadn't even poured the foundation yet. They were calling me to see if they needed to do anything special for the foundation. And because I did GFRC, I said, no, don't worry about it. Just pour it as normal. It's fine. And it was ground floor, so it's a concrete slab. Like, it's fine. Doesn't matter. But anyway, get to framing, and they call me and they say, it's time to, kind of get rolling on this. And so I get out there, and the space that they want me to fill up with a bathtub is 8 feet long. One knee wall that separates the bathtub from the vanity is 5 feet wide, and then the other wall is 3 feet wide. So it's this really cattywampus huge space that I need to then completely fill with a bathtub. Oh my gosh. And so instead of being intimidated like I probably should have been, my dumb self says to the builder, because like homeowner's in there, and she goes, what do you want it to look like? She's like, I don't know. And then she walks away, and I'm like, oh my God.
And that's so the worst.
It's either the worst or the best. In this case, it was the best. And I love clients like that, but you really have to know them. And so I looked at the builder and I said, what about a lounge chair? How would you feel about that? And he said, I don't know, show me. And so I spent quite a bit of time on SketchUp figuring out how to build this in the computer. And then I sent him a drawing and he approved it. And it took me a month and a half to build a mold. Because, and I've still got the mold in the shop, but it's this, 5 feet wide at one end, 3 feet wide at the other end. It's a lounge chair, and so it has to drain from a bunch of different places, and it gets thinner somewhere else, and it's got a step on the outside of it. It's a whole thing. And so I spent like a month and a half building the mold. Meanwhile, what I didn't realize until I installed the tub was that he never showed the client the tub. So Nancy had no clue what this thing was going to look like. She just knew she was paying a lot of money for a concrete bathtub. Took 10 people to get it in the house. We had to carry it up a dirt yard thing. And it was thankfully one of those where she was super thrilled. But all of that to say, I tend to be willing to do things that are a little bit out there. And I think that's what you market to people is you market yourself and you say, listen, this is my portfolio and here's why I did this. Here's how I got to this point. I experimented and I found clients that were willing to let me experiment and here's how it turned out. And I think that's a super important skill to show an architect or designer primarily, but a builder too, to, especially with some of the stuff you've done, to be able to say, here's the results of my experimentation. So you can be confident in my experimentation skill set. Maybe I haven't done this before, but here's how I get to the solution to a problem. And I think that skill set is super important and is really how I've been able to get the clients I've been able to get.
Okay. What does the initial cold interaction look like? Like really nitty gritty, and maybe you don't want to share the specific.
I'll share it. I don't care. Let me just see what we got here. Literally, it's really simple. Literally, it's, hey there, my name is Caleb. I'm the owner and artisan at Lawson Design. We're a small artisan concrete studio located in Canton, North Carolina. I recently relocated from Orlando, Florida, where I've operated as Price Concrete Studio since 2012. I love your work and I wanted to reach out and introduce myself. Please take a sec when it's convenient to look through the portfolio on our Instagram page, which I link, or click the link to my website below in my signature and let me know what you think. I'd love the opportunity to work with y'all when there's a need for what I do. And then I also attach a pitch deck that I have, which I can send you if you want to show it on the thing.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
It literally is that simple. It's very short. It's very to the point. And I make sure instead of saying if there's an opportunity, I say when. It's a popular finish and people are going to ask for it. So the hope there is that they say, okay, well, they're looking for that opportunity rather than it's a what if situation. So
I do want to. This is me having a different personality than you do, so I'm going to push back a little bit. It's one thing that I hope to be able to get across to people is you have a very different personality than I do. So when you look at that and you say, well, it's just very simple, it's very straightforward, and it's like for someone like me, that's not straightforward. It's not simple. It's not. Maybe it's a confidence thing. I don't know. I don't really know the mechanisms at play, if you will. But I never.
If you sent that exact email, you'd be very, very surprised at how many positive responses you get.
Yeah, and that's the same thing that I've talked with this about several times with Simon Phoenix.
Tipple.
Yeah, Simon Tipple, I think it's Phoenix Concrete Works is his company
Mm-hmm.
names, and he says the same thing. I was like, dude, you got to understand, like, my mind doesn't work that way. Like, if you want to come up with like crazy stuff with concrete, like, I can do that all day long, but when it comes to actually interacting with people and like what to say, like, that's not my strong suit. That doesn't make sense to me. So you pulling that up and reading it like word for word is, it for someone like me, is incredibly helpful. And I definitely don't think that you should downplay that, because like it it really is just like, I don't know, it's just that there's that much of a disconnect for someone like me. Like, I just think, like, maybe it's because I make it too complicated, I think might be it. Like, it can't be that easy. Like, and maybe that's it.
Well, I mean, you had I don't know. I think the skills are translatable, and I appreciate you saying that for sure. I definitely am a people person. So I definitely grant you that the skill set required for that is something that does come naturally to me. That being said, you reached out to me out of the blue and were like, hey man, you want to be on my podcast? I don't know why that's a different skill set personally.
Well, because you're one of my favorite people in the industry. That's easy for me.
Oh, thanks.
What we're talking about is like messaging up some rando person. Like, I've never met this person. Like, that, for me, that's why it's completely, even people who are a little bit removed, for example, like Chad, for example, does the amazing fireplaces or whatever.
Oh my
like,
gosh.
I've never talked with him
what's
before.
his last name?
Keating, I think is how you pronounce it.
Keating, yep. Man, he does some cool stuff.
I know, but you know what? He is, like, he doesn't think anybody wants to listen to him.
Seriously?
Like, 100%. So, like, I'm going to snip this out and send it to him just to show him, like, he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. Like,
What a freaking badass, dude. I would talk to him.
I love his work. So he's...
Oh my gosh.
I'm
been absolutely an inspiration. And I lived in Florida. I didn't get to do very many fireplaces. Yep. But yeah, man, his work is sick.
Yeah. So like, but like so like you're like one person removed of what I would consider. And then, but he's like 2 or 3, but I still felt perfectly fine just reaching out like, dude, you make some awesome shit. I really want to have you come on here and talk to me. And like, I'm trying to set up a date with him right now, but for whatever reason that's easy. But when it's some random person and it's about something that I don't know, that's when things get dicey pretty quickly, at least for me. And part of it was before I didn't really have a big portfolio. Even if you took my
Dude, look at your bathroom.
Well, I know, but I'm telling you, like,
just send people that picture and be like, I made all this shit. So come on.
It's like I feel like I need to have a certain like breadth of work, right? Like, oh well, have you made a countertop? And the funny thing about it is, the answer is no. I have actually never.
Dude, I've had whole projects, and I love. Oh man, here's a fun fact, and I mean, a lot of my work is countertops, so take that for what it is. One of the first things that Chuck, the former owner of my company, told me, he was like, "Get out of countertops when you can. They're a headache." Like, that's fair. So, I mean, I have done plenty of whole projects, and they're getting more common where I don't do countertops at all.
That's been a common thing that people have recommended, is just getting out of countertops as quickly as possible, because.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, I love countertops. I really do. They are a pain because there's just a lot more writing on a kitchen surface than there is on a coffee table or a bathroom or an orchid pot.
Yeah.
And so you have a lot more latitude for creativity in other areas. I mean, powder baths are like my freaking favorite thing ever because people love to experiment in a powder bath. Give me all the powder baths. I love them. I mean, I did a guy in Melbourne Beach. I did a bunch of stuff in his house, and the powder bath was like electric blue with a lake sink in it. It was ridiculous, and I loved every second of it. Yeah, so don't be. if people give you shit for not
they
having
do.
done a countertop,
Oh no, not that part.
I just don't see how the skill doesn't translate. Like, I make all this badass concrete. Okay, I'll make a countertop, whatever. It's not hard. I mean,
I've
with
had people-
it is hard, but it's not hard with the skill set that you've already developed.
Right. I've had people where I've shown them pictures of some of the stuff that I've made, and they want like they'll send me a picture of a vanity of some kind, like not one of the pillar ones like the Martin has shown every once in a while.
Oh, those are cool, yeah.
And it not exactly like that, but it's close enough. And they'll be like, well, have you made one like this before? And I'm like, no, I mean, I haven't made one just like that before, but I've made these other things, and they just, for whatever reason, and now I want to be cautious here, and let people know that I don't have the number of interactions to have where everything kind of levels out, right? Like you get the average, and so this was one of those bad experiences where I hadn't done the exact thing that they were looking for, so they didn't think that I could do it. And those people are out there, obviously.
Oh, sure.
But maybe it's something where you just have to work the numbers, right? You have to talk to
Yeah,
enough
I mean,
people.
Yeah, that's fair. I think my general response, because I mean, I've gotten that too, right? But I think my general response to that is, look, you came to me because you cannot find this somewhere else. And my entire career has been doing things that either I've never done before or haven't been done before. That's the whole thing. Like, find me, please do. Go find me another lounge chair bathtub that's made of concrete. You won't. I'm the only one that's done it. And it hadn't been done before I did it. And I'm not saying it's an original idea. It's probably not. I think, there's elements of what I did in some of Sonoma Cast Stone's bathtubs. But the exact replica of a full-on lounge chair, measured to the body measurements of the client, this, that, and the other, like, that's just not, people don't do that. And so I'm not discounting what other people have done, but my point in saying that is, again, not to tout my stuff, I don't care about that, but my point in saying that is you are going to make a career out of doing things that people don't do. And so if they give you shit about that, you've got to say, listen, that's what I do for a living. If you want something ordinary, go somewhere else. If you want something really cool that maybe hasn't been done before, you're going to have to trust me.
Do you try and head those types of, we'll call them objections, do you try and head those off before they verbalize them? Because there is the school of thought of, like, you don't want to give people objections that they may not have, right? But in this
If I do, it's usually in a much more offhanded way. I don't really head it off in a way that's obvious. It's more, hi Boone, look at there's my dog, there he is, deciding he wants all of my attention now. All right, you gotta stop. I head it off in a much more conversational way. So, when they start to ask questions about my portfolio, I will interject something like, here's all the stuff I've done. But, I mean, most of this stuff had, never been done before. And I just, part of what I do is the challenge. And so usually that will kind of offset any fears that people might have.
Yeah, because, this particular person, I didn't even have a chance to rebuttal. It was just, they just never came back.
No, they're probably not a client you wanted anyway.
Yeah, two very nice girls. I think we'll probably end up doing something with them in the future. I talked with this about Martin with Martin too, is I think it's easy for us to forget that concrete is still, it's been around for forever, but it's still quite new. And most designers don't have a clue how to work with it. So you just being like, oh, look at this really cool thing. Yes, it's cool, but they've got to take a risk, and they've got to learn how to
Sure.
use that, and that shouldn't be discounted.
Yeah, and I think one thing that has helped me in that regard is a lot of times, and what's a really cool tactic that is fun for them and works well for us. I had a designer in Orlando, and she's a friend now, but we did a fair amount of work together when I lived there, and I expect we'll probably still do some work together going forward. But I've got a couple of pieces in her showroom, and one of them is a desk. It's like the table that all of her, like other designers, like her junior designers, I guess, sit at and they work at. It's this big communal work table. And she designed it. And it was really, but it was after developing that relationship where I was like, you designed something and let's see how we can pull it off. And so she actually took that to heart and did it, and we pulled it off. But it's a 1 inch thick, and it's 4 pieces, and it's sort of held up by a metal frame, but the metal frame is attached to the concrete legs that hold it all up. So it's all like interlocking and interconnected. It's really weird. But like it's white, and all of the connection pieces are brass. It's really sick. And so she kind of just let me play with that, but it was after developing that relationship. And so, I think it's important to let them have the time to assimilate that information, that you can experiment and have fun with it. And if there's something that we as artisans who know the material feel like we can't pull off, we'll propose something different, but at least give us the shot at the idea.
When typically, how long do you see that kind of evolution takes? Like let's say from the initial cold contact or whatever to, do you follow up every month, every other month? How often do you follow up with?
About once every month or so in the initial phases.
What does that typically look like?
Literally, it's just, hey, sent you an email a while back. Would love to grab coffee or lunch or a beer or whatever. Let me know what your availability is. And so it's really more of as forward as this probably is going to sound, and I apologize in advance, but when are we going to meet? Not can we meet? Because I'm coming from a place of knowing, and of knowing that there is a market for this and it can benefit them as well. I need it, but they want it. And I think there's a confidence of knowing that they want it that does encourage me to do those follow-ups and make sure to get those meetings. And so, definitely that's a factor. But I do follow up about once a month. But I try really hard to, at the very least, get a phone conversation with, because you want to get past the receptionist. If you're going for a big architect firm, you want to get one of the principals. If you're going for an interior designer, you want to get the owner if you can. And so to me, it's really important to get past the gatekeeper. And so I do a lot of digging. If I want a certain designer or architect, I will dig around their website until I find their email that goes directly to them, or their direct phone number, or whatever. And I do everything I can to get in touch directly with them, rather than letting it pass through a bunch of layers first.
Yeah, because then you get into telephone and the message gets distorted as it goes along.
And so I try really hard, to say, hey, let me come in and show you some of this stuff.
So
but I would say it takes. From the initial. Now you might get a job sooner than this, but from the initial contact to them being willing to let you experiment is minimum a year, usually.
So you mentioned certain timelines of when, from the cold email to when you'd probably get a job with the architects and the designers, and during that time, but you're still kind of following up with them from time to time, maybe going in and doing a presentation of some kind.
Wine and cheese is my favorite thing to do. You ever heard of lunch and learns?
I have. I mean, I've
So-
never done one, but yeah.
You should. They're fun. So lunch and learn is, I mean, they're fun for people like me who like to talk. But
It sounds
But
terrible.
my favorite is the wine and cheese. It's like a lunch and learn, but it's at night and there's alcohol. And so I did this with Mark Michaels, who's a bigger interior design company in Orlando, and they do some really cool work. And I've had the privilege of working with them, so I guess it worked. But I took some props. I made some concrete charcuterie boards, and my wife laid out she's really, really good at presentation. So my wife did a really incredible charcuterie board on my little concrete platters, and then I took a white bowl that I had freshly, the sealer was about halfway cured. It wasn't fully cured yet. And then I took a PowerPoint or keynote, whatever, presentation. I dressed nicely, and I did it up, but I took wine, I took champagne, I took a cocktail, and it was like at 5 or 6 in the evening. A lot of the designers stayed, and so they just drank and asked me questions, and so I kind of did my little spiel. One of the things I like to do a lot is ask them what the worst thing about concrete is, because a lot of times they'll tell me it's staining or cracking or something, and as you know, it's not a problem that we worry about with GFRC too much, either of those, with the sealers that are out now, and I'm not really going to get into sealers. It's a big enough debate for everybody else. I know which ones I use, and I'll tell you, but I'm not going to tell you that something else is bad. I'm just going to tell you that I believe in what I use. But all of that to say, they tell me, oh, it stains. I'm like, okay. Meanwhile, what they didn't know is that, 5 minutes before the meeting started, so an hour and a half previous, I had filled the entire white bowl full of red wine and sat it on a shelf behind them. And so I took the bowl off the shelf and I show them, and I'm like, yeah, this has been sitting there for like an hour and a half. And I took it to the bathroom, dumped it out, rinsed it out, and it's fine. And little things like that really make a big impact, because it alleviates a lot of their fears. Because there is a lot of fear around concrete, because if you dump wine on the sidewalk, it's going to be there forever. And that's just not the kind of concrete we make. And so the education is super, super, super important to get work, because they need to know that, A, you're confident in what you do, and they need to know why they can be confident in what you do as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think... So here's a little bit of an obscure question for that. So you've been doing this for a while. Okay, so you've gotten to see pieces kind of go through the ringer in many different situations. There's a lot of people who are newer in a situation that's similar to when you moved to North Carolina. They're starting up the business, and they do not have the confidence in the material and or the sealers, because there is such a gnarly debate in our industry about sealers.
Yeah, and it really throws people off too, because they can't make a decision because there are people yelling at them from all over, all sorts of angles.
So that can be a pretty big ask of newer people, or even people that have been here for a while who have lower confidence.
And that's why too, I think the support is super important. Like, if somebody comes to an Ultimate class or is in the CCI network, then Jeff and I are... I've walked plenty of people who aren't, through stuff, so it's not like I'm being exclusivist or anything, but like, for instance, you're in the alumni network. If you called me one day and you were like, hey man, can you help me like design this presentation? I'd be like, yes, please let me. Like, I love stuff like that. So if you came to me and you were like, help me design this presentation so that I come out looking great, like, I'm all yours, And so I think that is the important
would even assume that you'd be okay doing that.
Well, yeah, and so I guess I'm putting that out there. But
we'll put your email down at the bottom, see how many people.
I'd be really curious. But I think in order for, and this is going to sound really maybe mean, I don't know, but I think I have transitioned into doing some of this teaching for part of my living. I'll plug this. I just put up a consultation webpage on my website. So it's lawson.design/learn-from-Caleb.
You're gonna have to make that a little bit shorter there, my dude.
No, it's good. It's just learn from Caleb. There's just a dash in between every word.
I'll put it down at the bottom.
Yeah. And so what I have found over the years is that I really love helping people and I really love teaching, but it's really hard to devote a lot of time to that when you're also doing other work. And so the only real solution is to monetize it, because that's the only way I can really give my full attention to the people that I'm teaching. And so it's certainly, yes, it's a way to advance my career and all of that, and I'm not going to like try and disguise that or sugarcoat it, but the reality is, if I want to help people in the way I do want to help them, I've got to make money at it because I don't have other sources of income. And so, but all of that to say, I try really hard to keep that kind of thing within the CCI network, because those are people that, me and, certainly Jeff and Lane have been paid to teach, and then by them going through the Ultimate class, there's access to Jeff and I, kind of ad nauseum. And I really relish in the opportunities to do that. So, I have had a lot of people from CCI call and it's like, how do I market this, or how do I do this, or how do I, and I freaking love stuff like that. So if you did call me tomorrow and you're like, hey, I need your help designing that email, like, okay, let's go. And we'll make it sound like you, and it'll be awesome. And so, and that's really why I teach. That's why I got into working with CCI, because I really love doing stuff like that.
How would you recommend the newer person go about gaining confidence in the material? Because there's kind of two trains of thought. You can kind of, what is the saying? You kind of build.
You can do what you did, or you can do what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And that really is it. You can experiment and develop the confidence, but then you may end up in the position you're in, where you're like, okay, I've got all this confidence in the material, but I haven't honed the skills of talking to people. And those are, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think you have to have both, or you have to develop both.
Yes.
And I don't think it matters if you're not an extrovert. Like I am, and that is an advantage. But I think your product speaks for itself, for sure. Yours does especially. And I think you can work around the part of, I don't like to talk to people. Like that's a workable situation.
Yeah, with social
but
media, it's definitely made that easier.
Oh yeah. And going back to how did I find people, I do find a lot of people on Instagram. And I have gotten a lot of work on Instagram, and it's great. So what I would tell somebody new, honestly, I mean, the hard thing is I would probably tell them to build a plane while they're in the air. And sometimes that's going to result in a crash. And the reality is sometimes you have to crash your plane into a mountain and then rebuild it on the mountain. I mean, I don't know how else to do it, because the best way to learn is in a situation where you really don't have another choice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you think about learning a language. Okay, what's the best way to learn Spanish? Go move to Spain. You don't have a choice. You have to learn it. You want to learn Japanese? Move to Japan. It's going to be hard. It's going to suck. Yeah, I know.
It's my place, man.
Like, if you really want to learn and you really want to get good, dive in. It's the only way. I mean, there are other ways. I mean, you can do Duolingo and you can do all these things that will work. But
that's for language learning, just in case you don't know.
In case you didn't,
Duolingo is.
Duolingo, Rosetta Stone.
Yeah.
I'll date myself with Rosetta Stone. You can do that and it will work. But I'll tell you what works better is living with somebody that only speaks that language. It's harder. But if I was in a situation where I was about to get married and buy a house, and this is my option.
Mm-hmm.
I have to learn how to concrete, or else this is not going to work.
Yeah.
And so honestly, I advocate for that because it sucks in the midst of it, but you're going to end up a better artisan.
Yeah,
long-term.
I just got done reading a book. What is it called? The Productivity Project. I think it was called by Chris Bailey. And he talks about where if you want to really focus on something, there has to be, what is the term that he uses? There's got to be enough force behind that. That's not the term that he uses, but so like that black entertainment center that I did with the live edge walnut that runs through it or whatever.
Badass.
Like, I didn't know how to do any of that stuff when I started, and there's things that are wrong with it. Like, you look at it and it looks beautiful, but I had never done.
Really good.
I had
Like,
never done drawer
compliments
slides
on that.
before. I had
Yeah.
never, and this one had 6 pairs. Of
I
drawer
did that. I
slides.
told a client I could make a concrete drawer one time and
I
put it in her
saw that.
showroom.
I saw that. I was
No
like,
idea how.
whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like never done drawer slides before. I don't know anything about them. I didn't know the different kinds. I didn't know how to install them. I had never built a box before, and that to fit inside something else. I had never done this type of a mold before for the concrete. Just the amount of things that were new on that. But you know what? The amount of attention to everything is staggering when you have somebody who is giving you a lot of money for something, and you don't know what you're doing. I bet you learn a whole lot quick. It's scary
You
as
do,
hell,
and
too.
It is scary, but I bet you money that if somebody came and offered you the same money to do it again, it'd take you half the time and you'd be confident the whole time.
Yes, and I would charge them more, too.
Hell yeah. I mean, that bathtub, I charged $10,000 in, 2014, 2015.
Charge
Which
more for it now.
it's on my website for 18 right now, and I don't know that that's enough. So if anybody wants, what I would consider a deal on a lounge bathtub, go on the website. The nutshell version is that I spent a long time without work-life balance, and I think to some degree I'm still learning a lot. But the nutshell version of what I've learned is that I work a whole lot better when I balance it well, so the client's going to get a better product. B, it doesn't actually take any longer because the amount of time that I spend, in a stressed out situation or whatever the case may be, is a detriment to the work. And so if I have more time at home, if I have more time for myself as an artisan, if I have more time, to hone my own self and my own craft, the better the product's going to be for the client, and that really is not going to be a detriment to their time frame. And then I think C is setting expectations. So you can't see it, and I may send you a picture later, but we've got an annual calendar on a whiteboard here in the shop, in the studio. And so what I do, and this is procedural, so for artisans this may be helpful, for other people listening this may be dumb, but I have clients give me a very small 10% deposit, regardless of when the project's going to start. It's like, if you're going to start in 2 years, I'll put you on the calendar for August of 23. I don't care. But you give me that deposit now, and that will hold your spot until that time. I'm not going to schedule anything else at that time. And that, it sort of works. It works well in the sense that we kind of know generally what the year is going to look like. It doesn't work in the sense that construction is always going to have some sort of delay. So we end up having some stuff piled onto us at different times of the year and all of that, which is a little bit frustrating. But I think as a general procedure, that's a very helpful thing for me in the shop to say, okay, no, I'm actually booked at this time, or no, we can handle it. And so knowing the process and knowing what things are going to take and how they're going to get done is helpful, and not just taking every project. I think saying no is a super healthy skill to have. To say no, I am going to close the shop for a week, or in my case this year, I think I've pretty much decided not to take any work in December. Christmas, my birthday's in December, Christmas, we're traveling a lot. And so I'm just like, you know what, I would rather have that time with my family and have the shop closed and have the opportunity to experiment and play with the CNC machine and develop new products and things that we can start fresh on and come out swinging in 23 than to kill myself in December for really 2 weeks of work. And so to kind of wrap that all in a bow, I think the key really is to set your own priorities. And mine are, and make them very public. Mine are on the homepage of my website. Like, if you really want to know how I'm going to treat your project and where it sits in the hierarchy of what's important to me, work is below my family. And that, I think, is going to give you ultimately a better product because I'm an emotionally stable and healthy individual that has my priorities set. And my wife is going to listen to this and be like, okay, well, you got some work to do, bud. And she's right. But the, making the statement public, I think is really important because then it sets the stage for you to be able to have those conversations with clients and be like, no, I'm on vacation. And I'm not going to answer an email. I'm just not. Because what's really important to me right now is recharging so that when I come back, your product is perfect or, as perfect as concrete can be, because there is no perfect concrete. And those of you who don't do concrete, I think it's worth understanding that the craftsmanship can be at a crazy level, and the concrete can still not be perfect because that's not a thing that exists. And so we try to embrace that. But my point being that the craftsmanship is going to be at a level that it would not otherwise be because I've chosen to take time for myself and for my family.
Yeah, I think if you haven't read that book, The Productivity Project by Chris Bale, I think you'd really like it. It talks about that a lot.
And I would add to that list, and this is a little bit more of I would say a spiritual thing. I'm a Christian, and so a lot of who I am and how I have informed, my business and my life is based on that. But the book is called what is it? Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. And it talks a lot about rhythm, family rhythm, personal rhythm, work rhythm, and whether or not you're, a Christian. I think that it's a super useful book, regardless, and really, kind of was an eye opener for me.
Yeah, I think it's been really good that scientists and that I think society kind of holds up on a pedestal have started really looking at this type of stuff. And they found here recently, like, once you go past like 35 and 40 hours of working on during a given week, your productivity just falls off a cliff. Yep. Yeah, and
so there are days, and especially the last month and a half or so, where I've just been like, yeah, we're done. Day's over.
Yeah.
And I think that's really healthy because we come back fresh the next day and we actually end up getting more done as a result of cutting the day short the day before.
Yeah, you get to a point where like your mind is just like you're sure you could work another 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, but it gets to and you have to really judge that. Like, this is where you need to know yourself pretty well. Is you need to know whether you're kind of making an excuse or if like your mind really is just done for the day. Or for the week, or whatever.
I used to. So when I was in college, I set a limit for myself. I wouldn't work on papers past midnight because there was no point.
Yeah.
And I think that's. Sometimes I have absolutely worked till 3 a.m, and I've pulled stupid hours. I've done 24-hour install days. Like believe me, I have done it all. I was on site from 5 a.m. to 5 a.m. one time. Well, more than once, and so. I'm not unfamiliar with those things, and I'm not afraid of really, really hard work, and I'm not afraid of putting in the time when it's required. But I think as an average and a rhythm, being willing to go home at 4 o'clock instead of 5, because the reality is you're not going to get much done in that hour anyway, and you'll get more done the next day because you're rested. I think that's really important to recognize.
I think
put in the time, but
probably to clarify, and let me know if you agree or disagree with this. We're not saying that you're not going to have those days where you have to work crazy stupid hours, but they should be the exception and not the norm. Because once
absolutely,
they become the norm, your quality and your life is just going to go to shit. You could
Well,
probably do
and
it for a week or two,
I would
but
say,
not much past that.
yeah. No, I agree 100% with that. Dylan Myers, who we've talked about, and he's a really close friend of mine. And I've told him this for years. I mean, we talk on the phone all the time. I've told him this for years. I'm like, dude, you got to find some balance because his work is amazing, and the quality of his work never really suffers. But, I mean, he's snapped his bicep. We think he's had a stroke. Like, he's killing him, or he has, and I think he's learning this lesson now, and I'm grateful because as his friend, I want to see him thrive and certainly be successful in the business world, and I think he's achieving that well, but I also want to see him thrive personally. And so, the dog helps a lot.
Yep.
And so, I've told him for years, I'm like, you cannot keep doing this. You can do this once in a while, but you can't keep, pushing out $250,000 worth of work by yourself. It's just not sustainable. And so I think it's, worth preaching as well as practicing, to say, here's what's important, and then recognize that you always have room for growth. Like I am not where I want to be with regard to this subject, but I have a lot of opinions and I'm working really hard at it.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out my daily schedule too, so yeah. It is what it is.
It is.
I guess it's probably the best place to stop.
I like it.
Thanks everyone who made it all the way to the end. I know the episode was a little bit longer, but I hope you were able to get something out of it. If you do have some extra time, a review would be incredibly helpful. It is one of the only ways that this podcast can get discovered, and we're not sponsored in any way, so it would really, really help. If you happen to use any of the affiliate links in the show notes, we may or may not get a commission based on if you buy anything. It's a really easy, no cost to you way of supporting this channel if you do find that it's helpful in any way. Again, if you want to leave us some recommendations of people who to talk to or content that you'd like to hear about, the best way to do that would be to leave that in the comments on our YouTube channel. Thanks again, and I really appreciate your time.